Certain pathways lead to unforeseen, destinations occasionally a solitary. Decision influences the entirety of your existence. Often one does not comprehend the sensation of traversing an erroneous path until the initial step has been taken. I dedicated years to making appropriate decisions. I married Anderson at the age of 38. Prior to that moment, I had consistently envisioned establishing a family and providing my future child with a nurturing home. However, Anderson never harbored the same aspirations. Initially, he fulfilled all the commitments expected of a husband. He stated that we will construct a life together as the years progressed. I recognized that I was but a shadow in high sexistence. Anderson never genuinely prioritized me or the family we could have established. His employment, his timetable, and his inflexible habits consistently took first. Initially, I deceived myself he might undergo a transformation. Perhaps one day he would recognize the increasing void within me. However, Anderson remained unchanged. He remained unchanged with each successive year. My solitude intensified. However, Drake was distinct Anderson's offspring from his initial marriage. Upon our initial encounter, he was 19 years old, newly enrolled in college, eager, motivated, and brimming with potential. Anderson consistently maintained his distance from him, believing that fatherhood entailed solely financial provision. However, Drake desired more than that. He sought to validate his worth and establish his own trajectory. He embodied qualities that Anderson lacked before I was even aware. I began observing him as Drake approached graduation. He made a pivot decision that altered the course of his life. All anticipated that he would accept a lucrative position in engineering. However, he expressed a desire to become a mechanic. Anderson experienced a loss upon discovering the information, shouting, fuming, and even menacing to withdraw financial support. I vividly recall the reverberations of that dispute rattling the walls of our home. Subsequently, Drake departed on the night. Following graduation, he gathered his belongings and departed. Silently, I was unable to bid farewell. I did not inquire about his destination had I allowed myself to reveal the extent of my pain at his departure. I would have been compelled to acknowledge a further truth, an unforeseen challenge I was unprepared to confront. 2 years have elapsed since his departure. I have encountered him only a few times. The connection we shared, it was no longer present. It was not intended to be. This evening, while I was seated in my dilapidated vehicle on a dim, rain-soaked road, I recognized that there was no one else I could contact. I was not yet aware of it. However, a transformation was imminent. It would exceed my expectations. It would occur autonomously. I grasped my phone, my fingers immediately poised over Anderson's number. However, I attained within second 7 if he responded. Was it not evident what his reply would be? Contact a tow true. Cameron, I am distant. He would terminate the call without further comment. I gulped audibly. I gazed at the screen for several seconds. I subsequently exited the call and focused on a different name. Drake, an unusual disquietude stirred within me. My finger lingered above his contact. Ought I to contact him? Was this only a plea for assistance, or was it an alternative explanation, something unarticulated and unspecified entity, utilizing this as I pretext the rain drums? Softly on the windows, in the illumination of my headlights, I observed a towering, robust form advancing through the darkness. A peculiar sense of relief enveloped me upon witnessing the scene. Drake approached the vehicle and tapped on the glass as I slightly lowered it. His voice emerged recognizable and unwavering. Cameron, are you well? My gaze fixated on him. His visage was marginally moist from the precipitation. His features are more pronounced than I recalled. His posture is unlabored yet robust. He was no longer a boy. He was an individual during these 2 years. It was not solely the distance between us that had altered. He had transformed. Indeed, the vehicle halted abruptly, and I was uncertain of how to proceed. I said I visited my mother. I'd occurred during the return journey. Anderson is once again out of town. I refrained from calling him because I'm already aware of his response contact. A tow truck, Cameron. He would likely become irritated with me for it. If this is your initial exposure to such confessions, please join our channel and subscribe with notifications enabled prior to progressing. You may find yourself desiring that this narrative remains perpetual. Drake inclined his head, little a glimmer of comprehension in his gaze. Understand the reason for your failure to contact him, he stated with composure. Rest assured, I have this under control. He inclined forward, unfastening the hood and illuminating the engine with his flashlight. I observed his hands maneuver with accuracy, his muscles contracting with every deliberate movement. He had transcended his status as merely a college student. His every movement exuded confidence, and his handling of matters demonstrated experience. It is evident that this issue will not be resolved here, he eventually stated, closing the hood. We must transport it to the garage. I must operate the VCLE due to the potential stiffness of the steering. You will occupy the passenger seat. I will park my truck here. I will return for it later. I did not inquire into it. I was not obligated to. My confidence in Drake's presence assured me that everything will ultimately be fine. The atmosphere was steamy during the trip. However, thessalence between us remained untroublesome. It seemed to draw us nearer, without either of us being aware. Drake occasionally glanced at me, his voice unwavering as he conveyed information, maintaining the dialogue and effortlessly occupying the space between us. I paid attention. I observed him, his hands deftly maneuvered the steering wheel. His voice resonated and his presence was palpable beside me upon his departure. 2 years prior, I failed to acknowledge the extent to which his absence created a gap within me. Anderson had consistently exhibited aloofness. However, Drake's presence was distinct, his vitality, his vocalization, his gaze. Even at that time, an awakening occurred within me. I was not yet prepared to confront it. I recollected that evening, the evening preceding his departure. There existed an unspoken connection between us, one that had never transgressed boundaries, yet had the potential to do so. The potential had always existed. Drake has returned, turned older, more mature, and significantly more captivating. An unsettling disquiet arose. Throughout me, this emotion was prohibited. It was not intended to be present here. However, it was regardless of my efforts to conceal it. I sensed it with every breath. I inhaled in his presence upon our arrival at the garage. I inhaled deeply, attempting to regain composure as I opened the car door. Yatan's inner voice said, This evening, you are both transformed and you are both aware of it. The garage R of engine oil and metal as the rhythmic patter of rain reverberated off the roof. Drake raised his head from beneath the hood, removing a fine sheen of perspiration from his forehead before directing his gaze towards me. His eyes exhibited little fatigue, yet his attitude was contemplative. It is becoming late here, marked his tone, deep and unwavering. If I commence repairs on this vehicle, now we will remain here until dawn. It is advisable to address it first. Thing tomorrow, I acquiesced. Although it was not an issue. Drake's posture conveyed a strong message. This was not only an ordinary night. He remarked that the rain was intensifying. Remain here. I will accompany a friend to retrieve my truck, after which I will return to take you home. I do not wish for you to wait out there alone. His voice exuded the subtle authority of an individual who is attentive to details. Anderson did not comply. In this circumstance, he would have been indifferent. He would have anticipated that I would manage it in some manner. However, Drake was distinctive upon his exit. The stillness of the garage enveloped me. Rain lashed against the roof as I seated myself, clasping my hands in my lap rationally. I ought to have felt irritated or anxious. My vehicle malfunctioned. I returned home late. My arrangements had disintegrated. However, the peculiar aspect was, I was indifferent. I experienced a sense of tranquility exceeding that I experienced. Joy. What is the reason this was merely a vehicular malfunction? The scenario was unremarkable. However, this evening, nothing about it seemed commonplace. Drake's gaze, the warmth of his voice, and the way his presence enveloped the place, an inward transformation was occurring within me. While I awaited, I contemplated it. Throughout the years, Drake matured into an adult, resilient, self-sufficient. Moreover, his presence alleviated my sense of alone. That sensation, whatever it may have been, was embedding itself profoundly within me. The roar of an engine outside interrupted my contemplation. Drake arrived at the garage, entering with water cascading down. His shoulders entirely indifferent to the rain prepared, he inquired, his gaze fixed upon mine. I rose, cinching my jacket more closely around me. Before affirming with a nod, we exited together and entered the vehicle. As we traveled, my inside sensation intensified. I glanced at him, attempting to articulate my emotions. I remarked with a subtle smile, when such an occurrence transpires, theme, majority of individuals experience frustration, anxiety, or a sense of misfortune. However, I do not share that sentiment. Interestingly, I perceive content. Drake offered a little smile while maintaining his gaze on the road. He acknowledged his understanding, occasionally even at inopportune moments. Circumstances may evoke, indeed his voice was gentle. However, there existed a more profound element within it. The barriers I had constructed around my solitude were disintegrating at that time. I comprehended the extent of Anderson's emotional distance and the profound solitude I experienced despite his physical proximity. Furthermore, I recognized that Drake perceived it as well. The tension between us has become unmistakable. I experienced an inward compulsion, a subtle yet relentless murmur. I wished for this night to persist. Definitely, as we approached my residence, I inhaled deeply, summoning my fortitude. Drake, you have been contending with this for several hours. I remarked. That you must be famished. Attempting to maintain eye contact. Enter. Let us dine together as we once did. Drake regarded me, momentarily mute, a momentary pause, subsequently, that recognizable, pleasant smile. How could I decline that? His stated, and an internal spark ignited within me upon entering and commencing supper preparations in the kitchen. Thestress I ought to have experienced from the night merely vanished. We shared laughter and engaged in conversation about past recollections, remembering as though nothing had altered. However, all circumstances had transformed each time our gazes intersected. We were both aware of it. There was no possibility of retreat. The gentle glow of candlelight illuminated the table. We had been conversing for some time, exchanging anecdotes and laughing as we typically did. It appeared remarkably effortless and strikingly familiar. However, the atmosphere separating us, it was not identical. Drake reclined slightly in his chair, crossed his arms while observing me intently. His glance exuded warmth. Additionally, there is another aspect, a whimsical notion, something knowledgeable. I must concede, he remarked, with a little smirk. You are as stunning as always today. In fact, it is somewhat incredible. It appears that you have become even younger during the past 2 years. If I were unfamiliar with you, I would assert I am 26 years old, and this woman appears to be no more than 30. I would likely be attempting to enchant her at this moment. I chuckled, surprised by the casual manner in which he expressed it. The unforeseen compliment disconcerted me, yet I could not refute my enjoyment of it. Thank you, but I am 45 years old, Drake, I remarked, maintaining my smile. There is an approximate 20s age difference between us. Age is merely a numerical value, he remarked, his tone descending in pitch. We are both aware of that. His words ignited a surge of warmth within me. The table became quiet, although the quietude was not uncomfortable. It was dense and weighty, as if something were on the brink of fracturing. Drake inclined, his head little, his eyes probing me as if he were perceiving something profound beyond the surface, an issue that we could no longer overlook, I remarked, attempting to direct the discussion. You have changed. As well, your departure indicated that you were beginning to mature. However, at this moment, you are an adult male. Drake's smile gradually diminished, supplanted by a more somber expression. He rested his palm on the table, his fingers gently gliding over the surface, pausing momentarily. He then gazed directly into my eyes and articulated his words. I had affections for you, Cameron. A sudden constriction occurred within me. Drake, I am aware, he persisted. I was never meant to disclose it, however, I no longer wish to conceal it upon departing the precedence. I believed that by honoring you and maintaining distance, I would forget. I believed it was merely a transient phenomenon that would diminish. Over time, however, it did not. He inhaled deeply, his eyes ensnaring me, rendering me captive, now observing you. In this matter, I experience an entire distinct sensation. Observing you in this alone state, it profoundly affects me, emotionally. My heart raced intensely, as if my entire existence had fractured into two parts. One part urged me to flee, while the other, a facet of myself is scarcely recognized, yearned solely to remain and absorb every word he uttered. Drake. I was unable to complete my sentence. His gaze was so intensely fixed on mine that I felt breathless. Subsequently, instinctively, my fingers extended across the table to grasp his hand. Drake grasped my hand. His epidermis was heated, robust. At that instant, all became silent. We relocated simultaneously as we leaned closer. We exchanged a final glance before closing. Our eyes, subsequently our lips, converged. Initially, it was sluggish and tentative. However, within moments, all that we had repressed, every bit of stress we had overlooked for years, was released simultaneously. Drake cradled my face, drawing me nearer, my body naturally drew closer to his. The more I experienced his warmth, the more I recognized that something within me which I had lost for years was being revived at that point. I realized there was no possibility of retreat. Despite Dotterbury's lips lingering on mine, I sensed a stirring within me. Something I had suppressed for an extended period. My hands autonomously glided down his shoulders as he drew me closer. Resolute, indubitably, and entirely unperturbed. I approached Drake. Upon gazing into his eyes, I observed his hand moving. Gradually, it heightened my enthusiasm. I experienced an inside sensation, something substantial. Despite experiencing profound acute pain at that moment, I remained indifferent. All continued uninterrupted. I emitted loud sounds and in harmony with my energy. I continuously expressed my gratitude to Drake. Breathlessly, he also experienced happiness. I observed the enthusiasm in his eyes. We discovered one another. We were completely harmonious in all aspects. I placed my hand on Drake's shoulders, concerned that my nails could be causing him discomfort. My body became rigid and quivered. I did not anticipate such a reaction. It was evident that Drake appreciated it. I implored him to release his grip, to cease restraint as he uttered my name. Cameron. His voice gradually diminished and ultimately relinquished control. A profound warmth enveloped me. Inhaling deeply, I allowed myself to fall beside him as I reclined next Drake. My heart continued to race. Our respiration was irregular. However, internally, I had an ineffable tranquility experiencing him proximity. To him it resembled reinserted a long-lost fragment. Drake shifted to his side, establishing eye contact with me. His hand glided over my hair, outlining my visage. His gaze exuded conviction, a gaze that conveyed the authenticity of the situation. This was not merely a transient diversion. Cameron articulated deliberately, "You must depart from Anderson." A constriction occurred with him. I had anticipated this moment for him to articulate it. Nevertheless, the words lingered in the atmosphere. He is unworthy of you. He did not ever do so. He abandoned you for years, never demonstrated affection for. You transformed your existence into a mere semblance of its potential. You are unworthy of such a life. I attempted to articulate a statement, however. He prohibited me by doing this. We might commence anew in a different location in a very unfamiliar land where we are unknown to all. I am under to all other matters. I hold deep affection for you, Cameron. I can no longer tolerate witnessing your sadness and solitude. I made a contact with him. The authenticity in his speech and the fervent yearning in his gaze, it profoundly unsettled me. A warmth enveloped my. Internally, an emotion I had not experienced in years. Expectation was this an evasion, perhaps. However, it also presented an opportunity. I was contemplating the prospect of an unprecedented happiness. I inhaled deeply and grinned. Drake, the words became lodged in my throat. In that instant, our eyes said everything, our hands connected, fingers interlacing. The narrative was not concluded. Additional information existed this time. It was advancing much. Further, remain attentive for subsequent developments. If you have reached this point, it is evident that this narrative resonated profoundly with you. There is plenty more to convey, and you do not wish to overlook any of it. Ensure to click the follow button, activate notifications, and leave a remark regarding this narrative.